Here we are. We have reached the final regular episode of Dragon Ball Dissection of the year. Stay tuned until the end of the video to hear about what's coming up for Dragon Ball Dissection December. Since this is the last regular episode, I ask that you please follow me on this journey I'm going to take you on. The first part is going to be what you're used to as we continue to make our way through the storyline of the Boo arc. The second part is going to be a little different, a little more navel-gazing, a little more topic-focused, and hopefully just as fun. There was some sort of story here, right? Yeah, Spopovich and Yamu returned to Bobbidi's ship with the energy they stole from Gohan. Bobbidi, having just been introduced, knows that he has to now perform what is known as an establishing character moment. He is the bad guy, therefore his moment involves killing the minions who so dotingly carried out his will for no other reason than that he is evil. And because he is very evil, he kills Spopovich in an incredibly violent way, inflating him until he explodes. That's the weird thing about the Boo arc. That's one of the weird things about the Boo arc. It's the most lighthearted that Dragon Ball has been in years, but it also manages to be the most grotesque. Keep that in mind. I'm sure many think Spopovich gets his comeuppance here given how cruel he was to Videl. I might be inclined to agree with you. But like I said in that episode, what has now been revealed to us is that Bobbidi controls these people as his servants. How culpable he is depends on how much latitude you believe Spopovich has, or how willing he was to come aboard. But that's not a subject we know a lot about since we know next to nothing about any of these minions. Clearly, beating up a random competitor was not part of his mission. Yamu makes that abundantly clear, so there is some degree of free will in there, perhaps? And we do know that Bobbidi controls people through the evil they already possess, so you could argue that it's his own fault for being evil. However, I find that a somewhat simplistic take. Goku is often held up as some kind of anomaly due to how pure he is. So if Bobbidi decided to take control of, say, Bluma, would that be possible? Would the specific actions she takes be her fault? Would they be those bad impulses we all have but typically control brought to the surface? Or are they planted in there by Bobbidi? None of Bobbidi's henchmen ever act like mindless zombies. Their personalities seem intact, as do their ability to make decisions. None of the others is implied to have even undergone the same kinds of physical transformations that Spopovich has. Shin and Kibito don't comment that Dabra is looking and acting differently than they would have expected him to. Dabra expresses his own opinions even if they conflict with Bobbidi's. He even eventually dissents. But at the same time, given what little we see and are told of pre-Bobbidi Spopovich, he doesn't seem like the kind of person who would inflict pain just for the fun of it, so I really don't know. But for what little we understand of Spopovich, we know even less of Yamu. Pui Pui blows him up before we learn anything about him whatsoever. I mean, this is pretty much all I can delve into, and I think you'll agree that I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. He is one half of Yamcha's name. Stunning insight, I know. And just like how we have tournaments with Shen and Shin, we have tournaments with Namu and Yamu. So the most I can say about Yamu is that it seems this tournament is stretching Toriyama's ability to come up with distinct sounding names. Before Yamu's dust cloud is even settled though, Bobbidi and Dabra are discussing how they totally know that the Kaioshin and others are spying on them and are already plotting to steal their energy. They can't extract any from Kaioshin and Kibito, I guess because they're all godly and stuff. It works for me. Dabra thinks 3 of their companions have great energy, however he knows that Kaioshin won't let them enter the ship. Bobbidi suggests luring them in by killing the others. Kaioshin, however, must be taken alive. Bobbidi's hankering for revenge over what happened to his dad. Vegeta, for whom betrayal is not just a lifestyle choice, but the zest that makes getting out of bed in the morning worth it, realizes what's happening a moment too late. Kibito is taken out in one shot, and I find it interesting that Dabra takes aim for Kibito first. It's as if he's asserting that there can be only one big guy, little guy pairing at a time, and right now it's his turn. It's not a huge loss. Kibito has done little to prove himself an interesting character to this point, and I can understand why it's the smart writing move. Since Bobbidi's plan is to basically coerce the heroes into breaking from Kaioshin's lead, it puts Kaioshin in a more precarious position of authority to do away with the one other person who was unequivocally behind him. Interestingly though, Dabra does not kill the other 2 they're not interested in, but instead spits on them. I suppose it's symbolic of how Toriyama feels about their roles in the story. Oh, you can't turn your hair gold? Patooey! What good are you? But it turns out Dabra's spit is magic and anyone touched by it is turned to stone. Well, it's a good thing it didn't actually touch your skin, Piccolo, otherwise, Well, maybe when you make your own clothes by magic, they're considered a part of you? Or you should have just been quicker. I love this skill. You should know by now that I'm sick of special moves that are yet another variation on Ki Blast Hurt Things. This is unique, has a surprising application, and delivered in that lovely Toriyama blend of creepy, silly, and just a little bit gross. Sadly, it's not a skill we get to see a whole heck of a lot of. Given how overly powerful it is, I'm not sure how often it could be used. It's kinda like the Kienzan. In most cases, it's either going to completely incapacitate someone in one shot, or do nothing of consequence. And because of how simplistic that would make fights if it did the former, it's likely going to result in the latter. Combined with Dabra's relatively short tenure in the series, the spit doesn't get seen all that much. Still, though, I feel it could have been used to create minor obstacles or partially weigh characters down. I mean, yeah, I know Dragon Ball characters can, blow up planets and stuff. But come on, it's Magic Rock, it can do whatever it wants. It would have been fun to see this skill in action a bit more. Maybe some kind of defense could have been developed, maybe by Kaioshin, so that it transforms a hero slowly instead of immediately, creating a ticking clock as the character who is fighting becomes more and more debilitated. Anyway, I'm disappointed in you, Kuririn. I would think you of all people would understand the importance of dodging spit. And since you were all ready to leave 5 seconds after arriving here, you might as well have stayed at the tournament and earned some more money for your family. Given how that's going to play out, we could have seen some fun husband and wife team-up strategies. Now you're just a useless rock. Well, we're down to 3 Saiyans itching for revenge, and when Kaioshin states that killing Dabra is the only way to reverse the spell, well, there's no way he's keeping them out of the spaceship. And so, the adventure begins. Now, allow me to switch gears. I feel as though I need to clarify something from my last episode, or at least discuss the particularly fascinating rabbit hole I ended up diving into as a result of my last episode. I think it's a diverting experience on its own, but it also elucidates why I analyze Dragon Ball the way I do. That is, I analyze it in its original context, tending to separate it from paratextual and retroactive additions. Therefore, I think it's worth exploring how stories changing over time can affect how we view them. I mean, hey, it's not me if I'm not laser focusing on a tiny topic and making it into a huge thing. Last time I made note of a specific 2014 interview as an example of late arrival paratext that I would not be including in my analysis of the story. The specific example I used was whether or not Bobbidi created Majin Boo. To my surprise, though, I received several comments asking something to the effect of, Bobbidi's not actually Bibbidi's son though, right? Isn't he a clone or something? My surprise stemmed from 2 reactions I had. The first was, wait, was that a retcon too? Did I forget that? Did I ever know that? And yes, sure enough, I quickly found that particular quote in Kanzenshu.com's translation archives, a quote that was also from 2014, this time included with the full color re-release of the manga. Rather than a child, he's more like Bibbidi's doppelganger. He'd split up whenever there was anything difficult for just a single person to do. So while Boo was changed to no longer be a creation of Bobbidi, Bobbidi became his creation instead. And technically a child is a form of creation, and a creation can be interpreted as a child of sorts, so it's more of a reinterpretation than a flat-out refutation? It's still weird, but there you are. Confirming that suspicion led to my second reaction, which was, are you kidding me? Did I not do a whole segment on this video saying how I'd be handling this kind of thing? Why are people asking me this? But upon further engagement with some of the commenters, an occasional common thread popped up. They had no idea of this interview. They were under the impression the father-son idea was a mistranslation. That, thankfully, backed me away from my second reaction, that of annoyance, but it left me very, very confused. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of mistranslations in English Dragon Ball fandom. I find myself confronted by them on an almost daily basis, and those are just the mistranslations from official sources. When I was first getting into Dragon Ball, it was an absolute wilderness of crosstalk and poorly translated telephone games describing content most Americans had never seen firsthand. But this was never one of them. Every translation, every iteration of this concept I've ever known has been completely consistent on this front. Nothing I'd encountered in manga, anime, or summaries had ever deviated from the idea that Bobbidi is Bibidi's son. Bobbidi even frequently refers to Bibidi as Papa, which is the same word Frieza uses to refer to his own father. And that's not even a translation convention. While speaking Japanese, Bobbidi is literally saying the word Papa. The meaning is absolutely unambiguous. So where did this idea even come from? I don't know if I can definitively pin it down to this one source, but I have now seen it referenced in regards to this misconception twice, both in contemporary discourse and as I'm writing this. It is a YouTube video from the channel Death Battle, specifically the video Kirby vs. Majin Boo, where this is said.
The weird lizard wizard thing had a backup plan in the form of a magic clone named Bobbidi. Yes, clone, not son, that was a mistranslation.
I'm always wary towards overestimating any one source when it comes to the spread of misinformation, particularly when they have no official connection to the source material. But as of the creation of the video you're watching, that video has been viewed over 14.5 million times. And look at the date. It was released December 19th, 2014, a mere 5 months after the Toriyama interview was first published. So chances are the writer of this video received that information from a secondhand source and mistook it as a correction instead of new information. Or that writer accidentally presented that information in a misleading way. If the idea does stem from this, it amazes me that a quick throwaway line in a largely unrelated video with no sources to back up such a bold assertion could have any form of impact on the discourse. I'm not bringing this up to bash them. Mistakes happen. I have made mistakes. By the time a video is done, I can have read and heard the same line dozens of times and feel completely secure in its accuracy, only to suddenly figure out what's wrong with it minutes after releasing it. That's why I try to be as careful as I possibly can. It's amazing how details can become so easily garbled. And in this particular case, it serves as a perfect example as to why I analyze Dragon Ball the way I do. Again, the text is very clear. No one would read Dragon Ball or watch Dragon Ball and ever come away from it questioning whether or not Bibidi is the father of Bobbidi. No one would ever think to ask, gee, I wonder if it's possible that Bobbidi is not the product of traditional reproductive means, but is instead the result of magical cloning leading to the parent-child relationship existing in a more figurative than literal way. It is certainly possible that this was Toriyama's intention for the character from the very beginning, and it simply never made its way explicitly into the text. I highly doubt it, but I don't want to pass off what is likely as fact. But even if I'm correct in my assumption, I'm not saying Toriyama is wrong for coming along 20 years later and monkeying around with that concept. It's rather odd, certainly possesses the potential to be confusing, and doesn't contribute in any way to the story, but I'm not against the idea in principle. I don't want anyone coming away from this video or from Dragon Ball Dissection in general thinking that I'm some stodgy purist who will never accept new information in my Dragon Ball. If we are to assume, though, that this detail about the relationship between Bobbidi and Bibidi is an element dreamed up by Toriyama at some point between 1993 and 2014, then that brings us to the topic of retroactive continuity. So let's talk a bit about retcons. Stories change and grow, and I am very receptive to that fact. Retroactive continuity is everywhere, and that's fine. It's often good. I find it a lot of fun to look at old stories with new context and see how that changes the interpretation of the text. It's a magic that is exclusive to fiction that what is old can actually become new again, that fictional history can be overwritten, or it can simply be altered in how it's viewed by the creation of new material. When historical revisionism happens in real life, there's something sinister about it because it is covering up actual recorded fact. But the interesting thing about storytelling is that it is two narratives, the malleable fictional story and the factual account of its creation and development. I feel like the precise meaning of this word is a topic I get into arguments about more than anything else. As Dragon Ball is a series largely written on the fly, it is full of retroactive continuity. When discussing retcons in fiction, I tend to find friction with two different factions. Wow, I really just wrote that sentence, didn't I? I swear that wasn't even on purpose. The first group consists of people who assume referring to something as a retcon is automatically a pejorative, as in to call something a retcon is to be critical or insulting of it. I don't agree with that. It can be, but it is a neutral term acting as a factual descriptor. The other group defines the term much more narrowly than I do, believing that in order to be a retcon there has to be some kind of explicit contradiction to prior material, which probably helps tie it into the former group, as plot holes are not typically received kindly. That goes against my own personal understanding of the topic. My own research, as well as the name itself, takes it at face value. Retroactive continuity refers to any new continuity that applies retroactively. Let's take just one example, one I receive a lot. The Choshinsui actually is poison. That's why no one but Goku is able to drink it. Because he's a Saiyan, he undergoes a near-death power-up. If you notice, that is something I do not address in my Piccolo Daimo videos. It's an interesting theory, and through a more holistic look at Dragon Ball, it's possible to come to that conclusion, despite the fact that the text ultimately appears to support Carding's interpretation, that it's innately beneficial, rather than Yajirobe's, that it's poison. But it's readers engaging with the material and using knowledge and creativity to speculate in a broader sense. I like that. But I also think it's important, for the sake of an objective analysis, to remember that it's built on a retcon. Toriyama has been very upfront that he did not create Goku with the intention of him being an alien. It was not information he held back for the purpose of a dramatic reveal, but information he created later on that applies retroactively to all of Goku's earlier appearances. But factually speaking, at this point in the story, there are no Saiyans, Goku likely isn't one, so a near-death power-up for Saiyans certainly does not exist. I don't think it's at all contradictory to be able to say, I think my interpretation is valid and worth sharing, while also admitting, but it's something that can only work in a retroactive sense, and for the sake of reference I need to make that clear lest others misunderstand that. I certainly think that philosophy holds for fan theories, but it's just as important to keep in mind for the author's reinterpretations. This information about Bobbidi, again, most likely, is the same as Goku being an alien. The only difference is the much larger length of time elapsed prior to the change, and that the Bobbidi information is presented in new supplemental material rather than in the text itself. But the retroactive application is the same in both. Over the course of Dragon Ball Dissection, I have pointed out a few instances in which the actual text has been altered to cover up changes or perceived mistakes, which results in making historical cataloging more difficult. And that, in turn, makes it much easier for misinformation to disseminate. This Bobbidi situation is apparently an example that didn't even need the text to be altered. The fans overwrote the text all by themselves. And that's why I feel it's important to understand Dragon Ball in its original context, because through this example we can see how easy it is to shift from this is how it is now to it was never the old way at all. Finally, yes, finally, I find this hilarious because I'm in a nostalgic sort of mood, and talking about things like this makes me remember that at the time I conceived of Dragon Ball Dissection, at the time I started working on Dragon Ball Dissection, this would never have even been a topic. It didn't exist yet. Dragon Ball was safely over. Yet with the exception of its inaugural year, Dragon Ball Dissection has lived in the shadow of new mainline content for its entire existence. If you want to talk about reshaping the context of Dragon Ball, the franchise looks entirely different than it did when I began this little project, but that's a topic for another day. So after declaring last time I would not be devoting my attention to these retcons, I end up spending half an episode talking about one anyway. You can't hate me more than I hate myself. Anyway, I hope this explains this to all of you who might not have seen me address it in the comments. I know there were several of you who, like me, didn't even know this was a thing. I also hope my initial annoyance and confusion did not bleed through too much in my responses to those of you who genuinely did not know this factoid only came to light 6 years ago. I honestly did think that my disclaimer was being ignored, and that frustrated me. I apologize. So to recap, for the purposes of Dragon Ball Dissection's review of the Majin Boo arc, Babidi created Majin Boo, Bobbidi is the spawn of Bibidi's loins, and any other factoid I say that contradicts things that you think you know? Just assume that I'm right. Life is much easier that way, and it ensures I won't have to cover this ground again. Alright, that was fun. So, Dragon Ball Dissection December. For those of you who are new, every year for the month of December I put out 5 new Dragon Ball Dissection videos, because I'm a masochist and have nothing better to do. And those videos are always staged a week apart, revolving around the date of Christmas. So the 4th, the 11th, the 18th, the 25th, and because there are only 6 days left in the month at that point, the 31st. so please don't freak out when there's not a video in the normal Monday spot. Of course, if you are in the $10 and up tiers for Patreon, you will get to see those videos early. Everything is subject to change as I work through the scripts, but roughly speaking, here is what you can expect this year. For the 4th, Reverse Scaling Muscle Tower. The 11th, Battle Royale and the return of the Dragon Ball Fashion Extravaganza. The 18th, some little thing with Vegeta happens. The 25th, we finally get introduced to Majin Boo. And we close out on the 31st with Dragon Ball Z Movie 10. I hope we all have a lot of fun and make it a wonderful cap to this weirder than usual year we've endured together. So please stay tuned for that. Please engage with this video, share videos with your friends. I'm really close to breaking 20,000 subscribers, and that would be a wonderful early Christmas present if I could. Please consider contributing to Patreon if you can. If you haven't seen the video where I discuss what the post-Boo future of Dragon Ball Dissection could be, please check that out. And of course, I do more than Dragon Ball. If you're not yet following my new series that pits Super Sentai against Power Rangers, be sure to give it a look. See you next time!